So hello, everybody. We should be about ready to start. And welcome. And Rajuta, if you'll go ahead and unmute and start us off, then we'll get going.
All right. I am so sorry. That was
That's what makes it a Zoom
error.
meeting, right?
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Rajita, and I'm from Safe Lanes. And Justin is supporting me with everything behind the scenes today. Justin from Fit Online. Let's just get some basics cleared out of the way. For any questions that you may have, please make use of the Q&A box at the bottom. And for any comments or inputs that you may have, please use the comment section. In past 3 months, we've discussed everything about human factors, from concepts to the implementation of those concepts, as well as the practical applications. Today, in the last webinar, our experts will be shedding light on the sustainability of the human factors concept. So without any further delay, I'll hand the reins to Rachit and request him to take us through today's discussion. Over to you, Rachit.
Thank you so much, Rajita. Good day, everyone. My name is Rachit from Safe Lanes, and I welcome you all in our last and final series of four webinar series on human factor. I hope in the last 3 series we managed to provide you some insight on human factor. In the last one, we will talk more on how you can take this further to create a sustainable environment in the office and on board the ship. Without any further delay, I would also like to introduce you to my partner, Rob, who is again from Fisher Improvement Technologies, one of the experts with whom we have collaborated in delivering all of our services trainings on human factor. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Rachit. Great to be here. And it's been a fun ride in these webinars to kind of think about the journey that you have to go through to make sure that human factors just isn't another program, to make sure that it's not just a whole bunch of theories that you pass out to people. My name's Rob Fisher. I own Fisher Improvement Technologies. We spent the last 30 years helping organizations and individuals understand how and why people make mistakes, especially mistakes that can prove to be catastrophic, and how you can do one of 3 things with those mistakes. You can prevent some, you can mitigate their consequences, or you can reduce their probability. So we're looking forward to this last in the series of webinars. And at the end, there'll be a call to action to get a hold of us and talk about what the journey might look like for you. You know, we've deployed human factors concepts in over 300 organizations in 40 countries. We have over 350,000 students globally. So when that call to action comes in at the end of this webinar, I strongly encourage you to use it. So I wanted to start today by having Captain Vijay just talk a little bit about what the big deal is. What's the difference between human factors being just another program that things says, well, this will come and this will go. I was here when it got here and I'll be here when it's gone. And really creating sustainability through integration. So Captain Vijay, welcome this morning. And what do you have to say about that? A frozen Captain Vijay, apparently. Rachit, are you frozen as well? Do you want to take that question?
No, I am not frozen. All right, let's see if Vijay is still not there. Okay, no worries. I will take it, this one. So in our industry, I'm sure you all must have experienced, whenever we see any new program or any new publication comes or new regulation comes, the very first thing we do is we look into, yes, there will be a change in the procedures. Okay. The second thing we talk about is, let's see what training we can provide. And what we have seen is the same thing happening also with the human factor, whereby we are talking a lot on providing trainings to the office staff, a lot on vessel staffs. We are creating a lot of training programs, whereby we are sending a lot of training material on board the ship. for vessel staff to undergo. However, one thing which we are not very much looking into is what are we trying to achieve? Okay, there is one new buzzword which is there in the industry which talks about on human factor, which is very much needed in the industry because we have seen the valuable output and a great improve in safety in other sectors like nuclear aviation. So definitely there is a lot of value added thing in human factor. But before we implement this, we should not just take it as another training program to be implemented. It is more about providing a structure to it in terms of what are we at the end of that, what are we trying to achieve. So that is something which is very important. And human factor is nothing but it's like a plug-in with all our day-to-day activities in the office, on board the ships, and not only there, even in our personal lives. But important for us is to see how are we going to integrate this in our operations. In our last series of webinars, we have talked about a few tools. Those tools are nothing but these are the add-ons to whatever operations we do. So it is very, very important that we talk about, whenever we implement any trainings, the very first thing we do is to see what are we trying to achieve with that training and how can we integrate that in our day-to-day operations.
And it may also be worth talking about what integration is. You said it perfectly. How do we put it into our day-to-day operations so it becomes how we do business instead of a whole bunch of people in the organization trying to remember, oh, I'm supposed to remember this about human factors. I'm supposed to do that about human factors. It needs to become a way that we dock the vessel. It becomes a way we turn it over. It becomes a way that we work on and off the ship. So that integration makes it how we do business as opposed to another program that sits out there that we're trying to comply with.
Very true, Rob. And again, let's say you have made a very valid point. The thing is that on board ships, let's say if we are doing a watch handover, be it on bridge or in engine room or in the cargo control room, right? Human factor plays a very vital role. Statistically, we have seen that there has been many incidents, navigational incidents happening immediately after the watch changeover. Why? So the important aspect there is that when we are doing the watch changeover, as a officer who is being relieved and the officer who is taking over the watch, it is important that he or she looked into all the various components. We have talked about a task-based system whereby the person is in the between and is surrounded by 6 factors. Yeah? It is important that we make use of task-based system to see what are the our conditions, the work environment, how are the equipments. Yeah, is the person whom you're relieving, is he ready to take the watch? Yeah. Do we have all the processes in place? So these are the things, checks, which we may do at the time of the watch handover. And this is one of the just a way how we can integrate one of the human factor tool.
Yeah, Rachit and Rob, here I would like to pitch in with this thing, if you agree. You know, I always thought that I have been at so many supervisory roles, commanded the vessel, and I've never had problem with humans. So I must have been good with them, you know. So I understand human factor. But then I never thought that maybe they had problem with me, or they had a problem with the way I approached, you know, because it a lot of time works with the hierarchy. Like I give instructions and they follow because I'm superior in rank. But after doing this course, I realized, you know, that how you can place a person in the center of the task-based system and think about it. And like I can now relate that how a safety officer on board who has gone through a human factor training and has a clear understanding of unsafe acts, unsafe condition, error traps, will do a better risk assessment. Then while allocating job, he will, through the knowledge he's gained by human factor training, he understands the performance mode, individual drivers, systemic drivers. He will be able to figure out this man at this time for this job. And another part is, master pilot information exchange and pilotage has been always considered a critical operation. And we all know that most of the time, a very short time is available for the pilot and the bridge team integration. And that is where a good human factor training, can be very effective that way.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for putting forth that captain's perspective. When you look at human factors, it's a lot of us are technical people. So just very quickly, when we talk about sustainability and improvements, you can really put a formula together that says we need to reduce errors, we need to maximize the defenses, and we need to mitigate consequences. And that's how you reduce incidents and improve sustainability. So when we use that human factors formula, then if we look at the elements individually, you heard them talking about the task-based system and how do we prevent errors? How do we reduce their probability? In order to do that, we've got to understand the definitions of errors, violations, deviations, active error, latent error. You heard them talk about performance modes, the mental models. When people are in knowledge-based performance mode, how do we get them out of knowledge-based performance mode and pull them into rule-based? And one of the ways that we do that is by understanding the traps that people might fall into and noticing the triggers that tell you that a trap exists. So a few webinars ago, we talked about how when someone scratches their head or they scratch their chin or they say the words, I think, I believe, or I'm pretty sure, then they're in that knowledge-based mode where the error rate is about 50%. And all of that is surrounded by how we manage our personality tendencies. Each of us on this call is a little bit different in the way our personality tendencies. So the first element is reducing errors. The second one is managing defenses, because you can't prevent all errors. Errors are normal. So in order to manage the defenses, we put in error reduction tools, things like verbalization, following processes step by step, and when to stop and seek out help. It's not enough to have stop work authority. You have to have the capability to stop the work as well. So in order to do that, we have to look at our layers of protection and our hierarchy of controls. And how do we manage the systems around the layers of protection, the Swiss cheese model, both before an incident and after an incident? And one of the ways we do that is through effective written guidance. Do the people who write the documents know the 25 error traps that you could write into a document? Do the people that use it know when they're being made vulnerable, especially as we covered in the last webinar, the top 5 procedure error traps or written guidance traps? So that leads us to be able to recognize what we call performance hazards, as well as we've learned to recognize physical hazards. So you've spent an enormous amount of time and money and effort learning to recognize physical hazards. There's a trip hazard there. Housekeeping isn't good. You should put on your fall protection when you're at height. But there's also performance hazards. Am I in an error mode that is trouble? Am I controlling the work environment, individual capabilities, task demands, and human nature of the work that I'm doing? Am I using the task-based system? And we have to make sure that we observe. So our leaders have to learn to observe those characteristics in managing defenses, and then learn to engage with the workforce. So we're not always trying to use our cause analysis or incident analysis to improve. We like to say that you can't correct your way to excellence. You can only correct your way to average. So we have to get ahead of the game and manage those defenses. And then the third part of that formula is how do we mitigate consequence? How do we recognize risk differently? How do we perform our hazard assessment? How do we integrate the concepts into hazard assessment and take compensatory measures? What tools do we give leaders like the tools that we give to workers? And then how do we use the essential leadership cycle as an organization to make sure that we know where the drivers are and that we know what the resultant conditions are? And we have a great podcast on the essential leadership cycle. If you just type the essential leadership cycle podcast into any search engine, it comes right up. So if you look again at the formula, we really want the number of significant events to go down, our quality to go up, our quality of corrective actions, our quality of analyses, and the quality of our product to go up. But that's when sustainability improves. And that includes quality, safety, effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity. So if you make this formula a little bit more complex, but not really, because each and every formula, everything has different component parts, and the human factors formula is no different. So what you have to do is create learnings around each of these elements. And we've done that so that human factors, again, doesn't become just another program. It incorporates the sustainable characteristics to move on. So Ian Collins, who some of you may have met, is one of the greatest consultants in the world on understanding the path of what we call education, integration, and sustainability. So Ian, I'd like to turn it over to you maybe just to describe the path of education, integration, sustainability, and why that's important.
Appreciate that, Rob. Thanks for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Great to be with you again. And exactly like Rob said, human factors, we don't want it to just be another program, another flavor of the month. And in my many years offshore working as a safety advisor, I saw a number of programs that came and went, and people sort of held their breath and did what they needed to do until the next program came along. And human factors is a very different experience altogether. And why it is that way is because it's not necessarily a new program, a new process or anything like that. It's a new perspective, and it gives a whole completely different context and a new paradigm to the way we do things. And in that sense, it's much more conducive to becoming a sustainable part of the way you do business. And I just wanted to talk through, well, what does sustainability look like? And there are three major components to sustainability. And the first one, it really has to be education. People have to get educated, from the CEO down to the frontline workers. Everyone in the organization has to get a level of understanding of the concepts. Once everyone's educated, then the most important piece comes in, and that's all about integration. How do we integrate these concepts, not to necessarily replace or do anything like that? It's how do these fit into our operations seamlessly? And then the last piece is about sustainability. So let me just walk through each of those in a little bit more detail here. Education, and one of the sort of the blessings of COVID has been the way we've had to adapt our method of delivery in terms of educating everyone, where up until prior to COVID, it was all client facing. We would go out to a client site somewhere in the world and educate the people on the human factors concepts. With COVID, we had to completely change that. And so now we've done a lot of work in terms of increasing our capability and ability to deliver remote. Obviously, we still do in person, but we can do online courses, and we can do a bit of a hybrid as well, where some in person, some remote, some online, live facilitated. And it's really, again, increase the accessibility that people all over the world now have to human factors training.
Hey, Ian, do you mind if I ask a question? What's that done to how fast somebody can can get through the education phase.
Exactly. They can now get through that education component at a much, much greater speed than was previously available. Once, in the past, we'd have to get everyone together. And we know that shipping and maritime is probably one of the hardest industries where you can get everyone in the same place at the same time. Now, someone can go online and go through their self-paced course in the day or the next day or the next week, as opposed to waiting possibly months, even years before they get access to the education. So it's increased that speed a number of times over. So everyone gets the same core concepts, just varying degrees of depth. Our long-term, how we know we build capability and resilience is through helping to build internal resources, internal capabilities, and transferring that education and that knowledge through to your organization. There's no point us coming in, educating you and then leaving without that piece. And so each person gets access to the science and how to apply it. Whether we have these baseline workshops, from senior leader workshops, manager workshops, what we call advocate workshops. And the advocates are really a cross section of your organization who are trained to the greatest level of depth in the science and the understanding, so they can become your subject matter experts. And then we have, if the organization chooses to go that way, a train the trainer style model as well, where people in your organization can be trained to deliver the frontline workers course. That is, if you go down that model. Again, all of these are accessible and available online too. We also have,
Ian, while I've got you here, we've got a really good question, and I think it fits both here and even later on. And the question is, when you're talking about human factors, are we just trying to make it easier to blame human factors or blame the human in any event? So a lot of it says, as such, with the current methodologies, it's believed that ultimate issue is human error for any event. By introducing this into the TMSA and SIRE, are we trying to increase the ability to blame the humans? Is that what this is about?
It's a great question. And that's a common misconception. And we prove that actually wrong over and over again through understanding the science. And in fact, what we're trying to do here is really understand, yes, human error is a big part of what we do. Most of the times, the science is built on a lot of Deming's principles, or one in particular where 90% of events are actually caused by something other than just the individual. And in the past, the philosophy has always been, someone made a mistake, it must be them. Nothing could have caused that. But we know that it's ultimately 90% of the times our systems that are driving someone to take an action, and they only take that action because it makes sense to them at the time. And through this understanding of the science and using and applying the processes, we can help uncover those systemic drivers of events rather than blame that individual. If we just blame the individual, we might fix the problem for now, but we ultimately leave those drivers of events out there in the environment. And guess what? We have repeat events. And this understanding of human factors is all about understanding those drivers of events so we can fix the problem at its cause. Hope that answers your question there.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And maybe we'll just continue to answer part of that question as we keep going, because it's really about the understanding those systemic drivers. So maybe Captain Rahim and Ratch can talk a little bit about why maritime needs that piece. And I think that question was a great representation for the way a lot of people think in maritime, because that's how we've been conditioned to think. So why is it important that we give people these new concepts and tools and integrate them at all levels of the organizations? Safe Lanes, take it away.
Yeah, I think Rahim. Thank you, Ian and Rob. Yeah, I think it's a very important and a good point, I think, which was raised, that, whatever goes on, we straight away start blaming on the humans. I think because probably we don't understand the human factor properly, the structure, the concept, and the tools. And that is why I think the more emphasis on education and training into human factors. And we all in marine industries over the years have gone through a lot of training. And I must say that the training has helped, to improve the safe operation on vessels. But what we have observed through our field work, that many companies, when something come up new, they start jumping and undertaking any offered training without first evaluating, what are the needs and expectation. And that is why I felt that some of the implementation and the integration has been fragmented, because they actually have not given the thorough thoughts of what they need and what training they need to be providing to people. The specific and structured training on human factor education to leaders and workforce has rightly been highlighted in the human factor management self-assessment as a very important aspect of making the leaders and workforce in the organization to understand the human factor concept and tools, as what is explained, by Rob and Ian earlier. The training also helps leader to prepare the policy and processes to develop a human factor integration plan. I think that is very important to start with. The implementation of error recognition tool effectively and consistently to prevent incident from human errors. Now, this needs to be once this has been known to people, people understand this. This needs to be applied consistently on day-to-day basis on the operations, and whatever activities we do on board, with regards to watch keeping, any task we perform on board. Yeah. The training also prepares personnel to a mitigation concept and help them to process to recover from the emergency quickly following an incident. This is an important aspect of it, because sometimes the incident do happen, even though we have taken all care and precaution, the incident do happen. But one thing need to be, people need to understand that how to recover, what processes to put in to recover from those emergency quickly. Yeah. So hence it is important to understand that only through proper training and education, the integration and practical application of human factor could be applied consistently.
True. And another thing here is, again, as Ian mentioned a while ago, we have also seen that in the maritime industry, we do talk a lot about recurring observations coming up in SIRE. We have recurring or the similar incidents happening within the fleet. Now, what we miss is to go in, in depth on the analysis to see why those are happening. And as Ian mentioned, unless and until we fix the system, we will not fix the problem for good. So it is very, very important for us to again understand this concept or entire concept of human factor. Human factor is not coming up with any new, I would say, methodology. What human factor is doing is just giving us an opportunity to look into all our existing processes, what we have, with a fresh, I would say, a new concept, which is to look into the not only just the human error, but also to look into the entire system. And whenever we talk about the system, it has to start from the top level, from the senior leadership in the office. It is very important for them to understand the real importance of human factor. And then it should filter down to the managers, superintendents, and to the vessel staffs.
So that brings up, we've got a really good question And that's one of the three most important aspects of human factors, as in terms of communication, challenging senior officers, et cetera. And, you know, when we talk about human factors and the most important piece, the leaders have to gain new knowledge, new language, and new behaviors. That establishes this in the organization. The workforce has to understand what we call the 3 T's, the traps, triggers, and tools. What are the mental models that I can use? And so if you think about the 3 critical attributes, the first one would be reducing errors, the first part of the formula. The second one is maximizing defenses. And the third one is how do we make sure that we view our problems correctly and fix the problems in the right way? So thank you for that question. I hope we answered it, and we'll continue to answer that as we go on. Justin, do you have the results of the poll? There we go. So about 60% have put it in the sustainability plan, but we haven't yet, about the same amount have not created advocates or champions. And our experience over 300 deployments is those advocates or champions as a part of sustainability and integration are the single largest component to success, as Ian was saying before. So thank you for taking that poll. So Ray, if you'll just talk us through a little bit about why senior leaders need to understand this education, integration, and sustainability, and why that's important. It's kind of a continuation of the answer to a previous question.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. You know, when you think about the education, integration, sustainability piece, when people are educated and we've made it part of how we do business, turnover doesn't really have that much of an impact anymore, because if you've got those subject matter experts out there already, you've got people with the new leadership that coming in that might not have the education, but they can help educate the new leaders coming in and say, look, this is how we've been doing things. It's not our program, but this is how we operate as a vessel. So no matter what kind of turnover that happens, those subject matter experts that are integrated out into the workforce and into the day-to-day work have created such sustainability that the turnover doesn't really matter. And when you talk about crises, if you've got the education to reduce errors, and that's been integrated into your existing programs and processes, that stays there. So no matter what happens to the size of the workforce, whether it shrinks or grows, those things all happen organically because we've got the core education and integration within our systems that are already there.
And Ray, you know, we've had this conversation in the past that a lot of people try to just put it in the processes, but they do it so poorly that it doesn't really work. They did it by some obligation, and there was a question that fits very well here about how do we need to change the thinking in maritime from it's just a requirement by the oil major to this is how we develop ourselves and how we can work on board more safely and efficiently. How do we consider human factors to change that mindset so that it's something that people actually use for improvement? And I think that the way we approach our education, integration, sustainability helps do that, because it doesn't just stop with you went to a course, the course is done, you got the check mark, you got the t-shirt, and now you wait.
Yeah, if you you know, I think part of the next slide helps answer that as well. It becomes, so our process of applying that big picture of, if you look at that first bullet, it's not just about the workers. And It's not just another program. We think, behave, and act and respond to things differently based on our new knowledge, based on our new education. We change our language and behaviors from that new education. Again, like Ian said, we educate from the deck of the vessel all the way up to the C-suite and the CEO level, because everybody needs to know the same information. They have to have the same. If we're going to talk about definitions and how we define error and violation and deviation, everybody has to get that the exact same. Otherwise, people are talking about things differently.
Well, and that kind of goes all the way back to one of the questions that was answered earlier, is when you start removing the blame culture and start substituting what we know, what we talk about, and what we do as senior leaders, that moves pretty quickly, right?
Oh, it moves very quickly. You know, when you start looking to find the real fix, not just fix the human. So remember the task-based system has that individual in the middle of the system. If we're looking at more than just that individual, we have an opportunity to improve at 90%. If you remember what Ian said, that 90% of events are caused by something other than just the individual. Doesn't mean the individual wasn't involved, they were, but we need to look at that big picture. We integrate these things into our risk awareness. So if your hazard recognition program, now you can start to look at new hazards. As someone mentioned earlier, we're talking about, Rob said it, about performance hazards. Now we're looking at the performance hazards of the task, not just the physical hazards. We're pretty good at understanding those. Integrating new concepts into hazard recognition creates a sustainable environment, which also helps develop that organizational resiliency and capacity, which makes you a more highly reliable organization.
So we've set these paths, and again, we've got over 300 deployments under our belt. And the reason why you start with senior leaders is if you can't get the senior leadership to change their knowledge, language, and behaviors, it's not really even worth driving it down to the lower parts of the organization. Ian, I'd like to put you on the spot here because you're out there with these leadership teams and with these workforces day to day. Can you just kind of explain why that's important and how the advocacy fits in here? Because again, it kind of answers in more detail the two or three questions that we've already had.
Sure. And exactly like you say, if a leader isn't willing to try on and use some of the language, you can imagine a situation where we've gone through and explained and gone through with the workers, you know, this science of the human factors, and all of a sudden a leader comes in and just says, you know, the next time someone gets involved in a bad outcome or has an incident, you know, they fire them straight away or apply, you know, a written warning when we know that the person made an error. And that just completely destroys the whole culture. It just completely destroys any sort of trust that may have been starting to generate. So the leader's role in this is actually absolutely crucial. They need to understand and use the tools, use the language, demonstrate some of those behaviors that are going to really communicate to the workplace that we're looking at things differently now. And I've seen it a few times where the leader's just not willing to apply these, and it just doesn't fly. And so that's why we'll make a decision as much as an organization will make a decision. Right. Are we going to move forward? Because if the leadership isn't going to embody it for themselves, then we know it's an uphill battle.
And we give them tools, right? If you can't get the leaders to use the language and tools, you're not going to be able to get the workforce to do it.
Exactly.
And those tools and models and things that you want the workforce to use to reduce their probability for error, the leaders have to control the system in as well. So we've put together, and this is just very quick. You could get on a call with us to figure out what it would look like for your organization. But we know exactly what education features need and integration features need to happen for whether you have 250 people or 1,000 people or 2,000 people. It's about scale. And so the education and integration is scalable for the organization. The information people get doesn't need to change. So we want to open up for more questions, but we also want to make sure that you, if you just email info@safe-lanes.com, then we can talk you through what your journey might look like, what your challenges might look like, how things comply with TMSA and other regulatory documents. Also, Fit Online, the QR code there on the screen is for Fit Online. And everything that we've talked about is somewhere in a free video on Fit Online, but they're in 2 to 3 minute chunks of information. So if you want to know about performance modes, they're there. And you can always contact either one of us through our website. So we do have a question that came in, says for an organization to adopt the concepts of human factors, education, integration, sustainability is okay, but what about the economic viability? And that is a really great question. The economic viability, the ROI on doing human factors right. So again, we've got over 300 deployments. The return on investment should be a factor of about 10 to 1 if you do it right, dollar for dollar. Our clients have seen on the order of 35 or 40 to 1 return on investment. So yes, you do have to invest in the education, integration, sustainability, but a lot of organizations have no idea how much their problems cost them. So, you know, if they have to harbor out 4 days that wasn't planned, how much does that cost them because of a human error? Or a collision, what does it cost? Or someone who gets hurt, maimed, or killed on a vessel, what does that cost us? So when you really start looking at return on investment, then this is it's a real bargain, because while you do outlay some cash to get the education, integration, sustainability, it reduces your quality problems, it reduces your equipment problems, it reduces your personal problems, and it reduces your significant events. So that's a great question, and I hope we were able to answer that. Are there any other questions out there, or does anybody else on the panel have anything else they want to say?
Rob, here I would like to mention that, you know, for the first question, which was very nicely asked, you know, that is this human error, human factor thing going to put more blame on the humans. So we all know humans are not machine, hence are fallible. So an effective human factor training program will assist you to recognize errors and implement sufficient defenses so as to make work more efficient and safe. You know, so that is one point we need to understand very clearly, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and you know, we tried to condense in 4 webinars what everything that we've learned over 30 years of deploying human factors. And what we've seen with our partners at Safe Lanes is each time they go through one of the courses and they create something, you know, Ratchet did a great job on creating the human factors integration assessment. So you can say, well, where are we when we start, and where do we want to be? It's a 4-phase approach to understanding how integrated your human factors are, instead of just saying, well, we think we're doing it right because we put some training out. Training is just the start. I think all of the people on the panel would agree that training is just the start, but it's the start that you have to make. You really can't do this without good education. And what we've seen out there, frankly, is a lot of people put out some training, but they don't educate. They teach people, but the people don't learn. And the
Yeah.
organization doesn't benefit long-term from it. Whereas the approach that we try to make, and again, partial answer to a question that was also recently asked, is if you give someone something of a personal nature that works for them, they'll use it at home, at work, and at play. They'll be safer at home. You know, in the US and Canada, I can speak for, I'm sure it's the same overseas. More than 90% of the significant injuries to people happen at home. They don't happen at work. So if we really believe, if we care about people and we want them to stay safe, we give them something that will work at home, at work, and at play. And then they will use it at home. They'll use it with their spouse when they're off the vessel. They'll use it with their children when they're teaching them how to drive. So human factors isn't only about how to operate a vessel more safely. It's about how we understand human frailty. It's about how we understand human success. And it's about how we build that into the way we do business as an organization. So Ratchet, if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it over to you to close us out. We really appreciate everybody joining us again today. This will be available. You should get an email fairly soon, but please do join us. Email us at info@safelanes.com and schedule that one-on-one, no obligation call just to discuss some of the things that we know that can fit into your specific needs. So Ratchet, again, thank you from the FIT team for the opportunity to join Safe Lanes on this journey, and I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Thank you so very much, Rob. And thank you everyone for joining. With this, we conclude our series of 4 webinars on human factor. I do hope that we managed to provide some clarity on the human factor concepts and how this can be integrated within your organization. Yeah, as Rob said, feel free to contact us anytime to schedule 30 minutes of free session to give you some more clarity on how this can be further integrated. We would be happy to do that. At this point of time, I would also like to thank Ian, Ray, for getting up so early in the morning. I know it's too early in US. And Ian, thank you so very much for all your valuable inputs. With this, I would like to conclude our webinar, and I look forward, in case anybody of you have any queries on human factor, we would be very much happy to address that. Thank you so very much for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks.